Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone to How to Ace Your NDIS Audit. Thank you for coming along. As I've just mentioned, there will be some interruptions with people coming in, but hopefully that will all settle down soon. And to everyone who is going to be watching this by recording, welcome to you too. So my name's Gina Ingrouille from Effective Policy. This is Keely. She's one of our internal auditors and assists with lots of things. You've probably spoken to Keely, any of you who know us. What we're going to do is we're going to look at how you can get ready for your audit and do well. Okay, so the advice is pretty sound. If you pick and choose with the advice, you'd have to be very, very understanding of, you'd have to know the standards inside and out to be able to pick and choose from the advice and still come out with a perfect audit score. So my advice to you is try to follow the advice as we give it, because this is how I get people coming out of audits with a perfect scorecard. Okay. And as you know, I'm not just about doing well at audits. I get very annoyed when I find client year after year comes to me. In fact, if they come to me 3 years in a row and they're still as bad as they were the first time and just want to have somebody get them ready for audit, I won't see them anymore. So it is about getting ready for audit, but it's about trying to maintain your safeguarding in place in between those audits. So yeah, I feel that if I kept on supporting people who came back to me with really poor safeguarding in place 2 to 3 years later, I feel like I'm teaching them that that's okay, and it's never okay. So we want to see constant improvement, because that's what quality standards are about: safeguarding and continuous improvement. So let's move on to, we're going to look at a couple of things. We're going to look at, there's a checklist that I'm going to be able to pass on to you, which you can use to get ready. And I'm going to look at how I train and teach clients to organize their information so that they can have all their ducks in a row for audit. So in the first instance, I'll share screen. And we'll just look at briefly, we'll look, and people are probably going to drop in and drop out as well, so not to worry. We'll have a look at, I mean, getting ready for audit requires, you've got to follow something. What are you going to follow? Well, you know, having a stage 1 and stage 2 audit checklist is a pretty good start. So whether you are going for your first audit, and that's a provisional audit, and by provisional, we mean no clients yet, or whether you're going for your first audit and you do have clients, which will no longer be provisional because you've already got clients and you will be witnessed on some of the services that you're already delivering, or whether you're going for your midterm, and the midterm focuses on governance, Division 2 of the core module, or whether you're going for your re-registration, which is just like the first audit. It cycles over again and looks at everything, every standard, every part of your business, or whether you're doing a conditional audit. That might be that you're in your first 3 months of operation, you've got your first clients, it's triggered an audit with the NDIS Commission. Or it could be another kind of conditional audit, which is that you've gone to audit and you've had a lot of non-conformities and they've told you that you have to come back in 3 months. And that's pretty important to get it right the next time, because should they want to, if you go back after that audit with mistakes, they can actually suspend you if they want to. So start with a checklist of some kind. What have you got to get ready for? You've got staff on one level. Yeah, you've got key business documents such as your insurances and your vehicle compliances and registrations, etc., and your policies. And then you've got your governance. So I always divide these into 3 things. You know, you've got staff, you've got business documents, and you've got governance documentation. So in this checklist, it will ask you to tick off on a range of things. Now, you have to gather that information, but what are you going to do with it is the question. Now, some of you will have softwares, right? And some of your softwares will be able to help you in the getting ready for audit, or they're part of the whole compliance and quality process for you. But for those of you who only have, you know, maybe a software that doesn't handle all of those facets, it maybe just helps you manage your client intake or your staff intake, then you're going to need something to gather it in. So I want you to look at this. If you've got software, oh, my software can do that, or oh, my software can't do that. And so it's okay to have a software and also have a sort of manual compliance system should your software not be able to do everything that is required. In fact, that there's probably 90% of people probably have a software but still have some kind of compliance management system to organize that data and keep them on track. Because I haven't seen any software yet that can do it all, and I see a lot of softwares. So it's okay to have a hybrid model of a software and a manual data repository or compliance management system, or to have it all in a compliance management system if you're just a small provider and want to stay that way. So let's look at what you've got to do. So if we look at this picture here, and we're looking now at a compliance management system, you're seeing that clearly? I'm sharing screen. Good. Okay. How I have this organized is everything that's orange here, because everything that's orange here is for a new provider, a provider who's just going into what's called, you know, a provisional audit. So you've got no clients. So if any of you watching now or watching in the recording are going for your first audit, provisional, and you have no clients, you would only need to get these ones that are orange ready. Yeah. And this is not only sufficient, it's actually best practice as well. Your auditor will love you. And you know what? If your auditor doesn't like you in terms of what they see in your practice, in your getting ready, in your understanding, in your what you're presenting to them, you've got them offside already. It just gets harder. You know, I mean, the one thing to remember about an auditor is the first time we see a red flag, we're like a little, what are those creatures that dig, burrow? I think rabbits burrow. So, you know, we just keep digging as soon as we see a red flag. So you don't want red flags. And if you haven't got red flags, then there's nothing to dig for. So, and if you haven't got red flags, you're not likely to have too many safeguarding problems either. So takeaway there, provisional is everything that's marked in orange. And what we're looking at here are the most important things to do with running a business. Key decisions, corporate risk register, your policy and document review, regulatory compliances, all of them, vehicle insurances, your drills, emergency drills, your emergency disaster response, your asset list, your conflict of interest register, your delegations register, your staff training records, your staff training compliances, you know, all of the things that staff need to have when you bring someone on board into a business like this. You have to have something around the risk assessed roles, which is relative to worker screening, and a worker screening register as well. So this is a way to organize your data so that you know as you go through this, you are getting ready for audit. So if you were to put together one of these things and you put it together 100% accurately, you are ready. You cannot be anything other than ready for audit. And if you kept it that way, you will be compliant ongoing and managing your safeguarding and your business responsibilities. And in that we mean governance, risk, and compliance. Please don't think that you can separate those out, because you can't. You cannot have good governance if you haven't got good compliance and risk. You cannot have risk managed properly if you don't have compliance and governance, and none of them exist on their own. So there's an umbrella term, governance, risk, and compliance, for a very good reason, is they all feed off each other. There's synergies, there's crossovers, and you can't have one without the other. Okay, they all come together. So this is one way of bringing together governance, risk, and compliance, and in so doing, it's shaped in a way that matches up to the NDIS quality and safety standards. So it'd be very similar if I was getting an aged care service ready, a home care service, but there would be a couple of different registers in here because the information is slightly different because of the standards. Yeah, so we would have something similar, but it would be very, very attuned to the standards in the aged care sector. So for NDIS, this is what it looks like, and this aligns to all of those standards and a little bit of best practice on top of that. Okay, nothing wrong with a little bit of best practice. So in essence, if you were to start with, I always start with your corporate risk register. Okay, so if you haven't got one, or you've got one, and I want to be really clear here, I see people go, I've got corporate risk register, have a look at it, and it looks like the last entry was 2 years or 18 months ago. You don't have a corporate risk register. If it isn't up to date, if I can't see that every single, and I want to go to it to show you. Here's an example. This is the pinnacle of your getting ready for audit. If you don't have a corporate risk register, a corporate risk plan, whatever you want to call it, that is able to say all of these things that you can see in front of your eyes right now, then you do not have a functional or implemented corporate risk register. And that's, if you were to go to audit with a few columns missing, you didn't have the treatment timing, you left a few gaps, or it didn't, there was some nonsensical wording in here, the auditor is simply going to say risk system, or risk register, or organizational risk system is not implemented. Just having a couple of areas in here is not enough. Just having 2 lines, of entry is not enough. There are specific things that need to be talked about according to the NDIS standards about NDIS services. And they come down to emergency disaster, SIL, client-related risk, compliance, human resource, organizational sustainability, governance, finance, legislation, and data security. And if you haven't got at least 2, and I think 2 is a poor effort, if you haven't got, but at minimum 2, then you are not going to get a pass on your risk system. It's the system. This holds it all together. This is where you have done the due diligence in working out, as an NDIS provider, what are my risks? And if you think your risks aren't the same from 6 months to the next 6 months, you would be very, very naive to think that. So just in the last few months, we know we've got a whole lot of decisions pending at a legislative level of government. So the risk today in your corporate risk register should be reflecting, awaiting all of these significant changes to the NDIS, which wouldn't have been in your risk register 6 months ago. And anything happens, that's on a macro level. Then you've got micro level, that you might have organizational changes that have changed your risk significantly. And I know that some people think, oh, why on earth do we have to write all this down? Because you know what? 9 out of every 10 clients that I work with, they didn't know what they didn't know, and they hadn't mapped out their risk. And so the only way to map out your risk is to do it. And this is mapping out your risk so that you're more protected. You've actually thought through very significant problems, such as, what do you want to do? Do you want to go into business and just hope that everyone pays you on time? Or like a provider that I sat with, plan managed clients don't always pay on time, right? Because you've got more clients who like to be able to call the shots. So what can you do when you've identified this, you've brought it to the surface, now you're going to put in a strategy. Well, she decided, we'll make sure all the invoices are in the correct format, because you know how they love to send them back if they're not specifically the way they want. Find out how they want it and send it back and send them that way. Liaise with all the support coordinators so that you know the participant has sufficient funds. Don't just take the client on thinking that they've got it. You've got to find out if they've got the funds, having a service agreement in place so the participant knows what to expect if they don't pay on time. Okay. You're not a charity. It's not a block funded service. Everybody has to be paid, and it's okay to say no, and it's okay to turn people away, and it's okay to do debt collection on people. Okay. So you have to map out. That's just one. That's just a drop in the ocean. There are all these areas that need to be looked at. And I want to stress, if you leave, the only reason these areas are blank is because they belong to the all in the same area, but you cannot leave fields empty. Fields may not be left empty. Okay. So this is the perfect example of one that is complete. So if you can get your corporate risk, your business risk, corporate risk, whatever you want to call it, correct, you're on a really, you are like 25% there. And if you even attempt to go into your audit without one, you look a bit silly, and also you're not going to get it. Okay. And also, you're not really doing the best for yourself in terms of managing your business and your business risk. Okay. So this is a prime example of a completed risk, all the way across every field. We haven't got to here because we haven't yet actually had a review. So we've marked out, when we do the reviews. So that's first up. All right. So the next thing is you've got participant data. All right. So you're going to either have participant data that's going to be in your software systems, or some of it's or it's all going to be in paper-based or electronic paper-based or real paper-based. But you might have both as well, and that's okay, because what I want you to be able to say is that your risk is managed. So for the most part, I will see most people who have done an assessment for their client and a risk assessment, but they're not actually showing me anywhere that they've been able to have a system in place, because we're talking about systems here. They're not actually showing me how they have a system in place to be reminded of when their review is due. So once again, if you always look while I'm doing this, if I even went back to the corporate risk register, the date of review will be in red. Red is the most important thing here. Okay, red, date of review. This is all great. It is, we need it, but this is the most important. That shows, oh, okay, they've got every intention of reviewing that person's risk assessment. Yep. So very important. So we've gone corporate risk. Now we're looking at individual risks, and we're looking at where you've recorded it so that we know that when their risk assessments are due, and that you've got some awareness around what was that risk. Because if you have to go into 150 different files to check out what 150 people's risks are and what date they're due, and just remember to do that, we don't have a lot of faith, because there's no system. Yeah, we don't have a lot of, we don't see a system in place. So the system can be reflected by this overarching document or overarching software that you may have. And remember, I haven't seen a software that does everything yet. It does some, but it doesn't do all. So take what your software can give you, but find an overflow method for what it can't manage for you. Okay, so we've gone corporate risk, we've got participant risk. So we go back to the directory. We would need to have here, what we're going to be looking for is some form of a record of your decision making. Now, this is in the provisional one because most people don't have staff to have staff meetings at the time they're first getting registered. So this is where you record all the decisions made about business things. The other way of doing that, of course, is meeting minutes. But either way, we need to see meeting minutes, okay? Meeting minutes or just a record of your decisions. And that's what meeting minutes are. They're a record of your decisions. If you don't have them, we're going to say there's a system of governance missing, yeah? Because that's what we're looking for in the standards. So we're going to, the first thing without any meeting minutes is, well, and Keely will attest to this, we know governance isn't there. You know, we know governance is pretty loose. Yeah, you know, pretty loose if we can't find minutes. But we, you know, those people will say, but we have minutes, we have meetings all the time. Great, but you're not writing it down. I only have to take your word for that. So, you know, we need to see that it is written down, it can be referred back to, and then we have some idea that governance is working. The other thing is governance working at all levels? Because you've only got sort of a partial governance if you've got frontline staff, team leaders, and then management and maybe a board. If that's your situation, then good governance would indicate that you are having meetings and you've got minutes at all levels. So if you, depending on your structure, if you can't demonstrate that you're recording the conversations at all those levels, then you are not going to enter into that audit with good governance in place. So governance, risk systems, it goes without saying that every policy needs to have a date for review. We know that there's a lot of consultants out there now. We know that we're doing all the document review for most of you if you're purchasing through us, but we still need to see some sort of intention or the fact that, you know, well, these people send us their updates on these dates quarterly, for example, for effective policy, or and wherever you've changed a policy, and we hope that you would change a policy according to your own organisation, that you've made a record of that. So that's about showing us that system's in place. Insurances. A lot of people will have their insurances in their software. Other people don't have software for that and they don't want to. That's fine. Either is fine. It doesn't matter. But if we can't see that you've got a way of knowing that, some way that alerts you to the idea that these are due for payment, then there's a problem. So we need to see that you know how to do it. You know, there are some audits where we spent 10 minutes and that's as far as we'll spend with someone looking for their insurances. Coming to audit, looking for their insurances, please. I mean, at the very least, have them written up in some orderly fashion, or whether it's in a software or whether it's in a manual document where you know what the policy numbers are, you know what the due dates are, you've got a way of being told, you know, whether they're overdue, whether that's an alert in your software, an alert in your Outlook, or being able to see a visual alert here. Doesn't matter, but spending 10 minutes, we just find that quite amusing that someone has to spend 10 minutes to find their insurances to tell us if they're up to date. That's not what you want to do. You don't want to do that. So working our way through vehicles as well, every vehicle. So every vehicle, you need to have a person's license. You need to have the policy number for insurances for the vehicles, whether they're your vehicles and anyone who is driving for you as an employee, PAYG, or as a contractor, ABN, you need to have those. And I know most people know that these days. We're a few years down the track now in all of this. But for new people, maybe you don't. If you're a new provider, maybe you don't. But registration, insurances, and license numbers of people. And best way to put this to you, why do we need all this information and why is it so important to keep a track of it in something like this or in a software that can alert? The reason is that if that person has an accident while they're working for you and they weren't insured because they let their insurance expire, who do you think is going to be in trouble for what damage is done to that person or another person's car? And please put in the chat box who you think is going to be responsible for that. Yeah, you will, because you said when you became an NDIS provider and you agreed to these standards and you agreed to the legislation by the standards, within the standards, you said you will make sure everybody has what's required. So you'll be responsible. I'm sure they'll get into trouble too in some way. You know, they could lose something, but you'll be in trouble. So it's you're protecting you by getting all of these. You want to protect your business. That's what it's all about. And in doing so, we also want to protect clients and staff, but you want to protect your business, and that's the way to do it. So coming back, so we've gone, okay, we've got systems. These are systems, putting systems in place. Governance, your corporate risk, your policies, which is your compliance and your quality, your regulatory insurance, regulatory vehicles. These are our systems for protection, for risk and compliance. Yep. Disaster and emergency, we have to show in proportionality to the type of service you run, you need to show that you have some kind of emergency drill in place. Of course, it's different to the person who works from home in their garage to the person who runs 25 SIL homes in proportion, but you must have something in proportion to the service that you run. Disaster response process, well, you need to have a emergency and disaster plan. Okay, everybody has to, no matter what. There's sort of no, only if you're on verification, I think that you don't have to have that at this point. Asset list. There is nothing in there that really talks about you having an asset list, but I can't understand anyone running a business without an asset list. It just seems bizarre. I mean, I've come from a not-for-profit running two major not-for-profits in New South Wales, and it would just be, I would be laughed out of the circles of management if I didn't have an asset list. So I don't know why you wouldn't want to be able to trace all of your equipment and things like that. Plus, in the not-for-profit world, if we didn't have that, we'd be in big trouble. So conflict of interest. Another way of having a system in place for management of conflict of interest, and which feeds into the risk system, because we're looking at systems and processes. Yeah, everyone, you need to have, if you've got, I see people getting really good at getting their conflict of interest forms signed now. There are still some people that need to learn, but if you haven't got them listed anywhere, you may as well take that conflict of interest form that's completed, signed, beautiful mitigation strategy and all of that. If you haven't got a reminder date for when it's due to be reviewed, looked at again, then you may as well take that conflict of interest form when you've completed it beautifully and just crumple it up and put it in the bin, okay? Because it's meaningless if it's not listed somewhere to be able to be reviewed. So you go to audit without some strategy for reviewing conflict of interest, then you will say the system is not fully implemented. That's what we'll say. Your system, we'll give you some brownie points for having the conflict of interest form filled out, but you're going to lose. You're not going to get a conform, because the fact is you've got no way to demonstrate to us that you're monitoring the date that this should be reviewed, okay? Because it's not a set and forget. We need a system. So there's the implementation, which is the doing of the forms, whether it's a risk assessment for a client or a risk assessment for a conflict of interest, or a risk assessment on an environment, or a risk assessment on anything. But if we can't see the system that you're using to manage that by following up, you're not going to get a conforming, okay? So we need to see that they are all listed, or, there's a system in place reminding you, okay? Now that conflicts of interest, we're looking for staff and we're looking for clients, okay? Some people forget about the client conflict of interest. So staff, client, and it's not just the conflict of interest of people having other jobs. It's also the conflict of interest of being related to someone, friends with someone. There are many different types of conflict of interest, and I find people are getting better at it, which is really good to see. Delegations register. Most people fall down on that one. And what you need to have is something that says, here's the person and there's their responsibilities. Here's the person that's going to do their job, the head honcho here. Here's the person, the plan B, I call it. What's your plan B? Who's the person who's going to do their job when they are not around? They might get hit by a bus, they might get sick, they might whatever, they might go away overseas for a year and want a break. Whatever it is, who is going to do their job? And then you've got all the other senior people in your business and then frontline staff. It's really good to see what people can do and who can't do this, because there's no governance without that. It's like, who does what? Do I have to go to a position description every time? Can I look at everyone's position descriptions to see what they do? No, that's just not, that's not organized. So the standards ask for a delegations policy or register. I don't see the point in writing a delegations policy. I just use a delegations register. It's easy to change. It's easy to update. It can show, it doesn't have to be every person. It's each position. You know what I mean? So that might be the team leaders can all do X, the key workers can do Y, and some of those will overlap. But gosh, it's good to be able to see that. Anyway, if you go without some kind of delegations table or matrix, you will get a non-conformity for that. So coming down to your really important areas, you all would know, I think those who have been to audit, you know, you have to have some kind of, you know, really robust staff HR kind of system. Now, I know a lot of softwares can do it, and that's usually pretty well managed. But if you're not on a software, then you're still needing to do a system like this. And do you know, I even know many people on a software who still use this because the software doesn't quite get it, doesn't quite allow them to be able to manage all of it. So basically, this one is around capturing qualifications, professional body, all of the mandatory trainings, which have a red header, yeah? Everything mandatory to the organisation. And then you can also just continue to put in there the things that you need given the service that you are. So there's mandatory, and then there's the things that people need to do or you want them to do. That's a little bit different. So your checks, etc. Now, when we see that people have no way of monitoring when a check is due, the system isn't working. So we give you points for having some stuff in a register, or we have some points for having the certificates in somebody's file, but we take away, we won't give you a conformity because we can't see a system, and the system is how I monitor when they're due. Yeah. Okay, so that's what we're looking for, the systems. So if you take anything away, it'll be about systems, and how your audit is about looking at systems and processes. Now we can go straight through to the worker screening here, which is where you would list everybody's worker screening check, and that they have one. And when someone doesn't have a worker screening check, you must be able to demonstrate you're supervising them until they do. Okay, and that should all be shown in some way. In some way, you need to be able to demonstrate that you've got it managed and there's a system in process, and you won't forget because there are all these checks and balances in place. So you might say, okay, so I can see that I can look at all of this and it's going to show me all the dates, and it's going to be lighting up like a Christmas tree with, you know, overdue and stuff like that. How then, well, how do I know who's going to do it? Well, you allocate in your delegations register, who is it that primarily looks after the compliance management system, and who will do it when they're away, and who will do it maybe as a backup if you need to, if you're a large organisation. It'll also be in your position description. It'll also be in your performance appraisal, and it'll also be dealt with in supervision. So we have these backup documents, and then we start to feel a little bit more, confident that someone knows what they're doing and that these clients are in good hands and taxpayers' money is in good hands. But when we don't see that, we know that people are flying by the seat of their pants. Okay, so before the NDIS, before the open market, we wouldn't have dreamt of not having these things. Our standards for community health and community service standards were probably 3 times more strict than the NDIS, but nobody would have even considered not doing this. So we're, you know, we're playing catch up a little bit, I guess, with the NDIS market, but we're getting there. So we've dealt with staff matrix, which was all of your competencies and all of your legal checks, etc., and your risk assessed roles and your there is one thing with the risk assessed role. It is in the standards word for word that if you haven't got a list of all of your risk assessed roles, I don't mean the people, I mean support worker, and you might have 100 support workers, but support workers enough, admin person because they interface with staff, etc. Every role name that needs to be have a worker screening check, why it needs to have a worker screening check, and here's word for word why this needs to occur. If you don't get pulled up on these, it's just because the auditor you got was either feeling lazy on the day or just didn't know, wasn't experienced. So I'm not giving you what the lazy auditors are looking for. I'm giving you what we look for and what a good auditor looks for according to the standards. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing my job. So this is required. If you've gotten away with it, you've just gotten away with it. Doesn't mean you'll get away with it forever. It doesn't mean it's a right thing. So they're all the things you would go as a provisional provider. So they're all the things that nobody can do without. Then we've got how else would you need to have an incident management system. Okay, it doesn't matter what that looks like, but if you don't have one, you won't get through this. Now there are some incident softwares, and if you've got one, great, make sure it works for you. And when it works for you, it means it's reminding you or it's prompting you of the process. So a system will prompt you of the process, what's required, and make you be accountable to it being closed off. I've finished that one. It's done. Okay. Incident forms. We probably see a lot of non-conformities in incident management because you've got an incident form for an incident that occurred. That doesn't mean you've done your job. You need to have some kind of system, whether that's the software or you've got a register where everything up here in this header is from the standards. This is what the standards want. This is their process in NDIS. Who is involved, worker involved, nature of the supports being provided, person recording it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So basically there is a bit of best practice which is over and above the standards in there, but it's stuff that I want to know in doing my job as well as what's in the standards. Still today, this many years on, we will still see reports that don't have the ability to say whether it's reportable or not. And still today, I will see softwares that don't allow you to be able to say it's reportable. That just seriously doesn't work for me. Reportable should stand out like the Coca-Cola sign at King's Cross. It really needs to. So once again, in many ways, having that piece of paper in the client's file or on the client's software profile is one thing, but this is the system. That is just part of the beginnings of a system. This is the system. And the other part of this system, incident and complaint, is that anything that needs fixing, anything you see, okay, I can see that we could do something to make sure this doesn't happen again, to make sure that that appears in your continuous quality improvement register. So there are two standards that say, where's the continuous quality improvement register, Kelly? Dearie me. It'd be under management, wouldn't it? Yep, here we go. There are two standards that say very specifically that continuous quality improvement is evidenced on incident and complaint, which means that when you have some incidents and you have some complaints, you're looking at them to go, yeah, I can see where we can improve that and that won't happen again for us, or it'll certainly be minimized. So incident and complaints must be shown also in continuous quality improvement. You would expect too that some risks can be diminished by continuous quality improvements, and you could expect many things could be diminished or improved by the risk of them can be diminished or the success of them can be improved by having a quality improvement action for them. So once again, if you don't have something in your continuous quality improvement plan at your, let's just say, every other audit except your very first one where you have no clients. So all the others require continuous quality improvement. Everyone needs to demonstrate that they have a program of internal audits in between their audits. Now, the other way around that is that you have an independent auditor come in and do your audit for you in between your commission audits, but everybody has to. So whether you're doing them yourself or whether you're getting someone in, you've got to have the demonstration and the evidence that, you know, one or the other is occurring. We don't really need to touch on the root cause, except for me to say that if we see an incident and it's reportable, it says in standards that you're, and the commission require of a reportable incident that you do a root cause analysis. We're not talking about, you know, some $50,000 root cause analysis project. We're talking about going through a process of figuring out really at a micro level what caused it, how we can make sure it doesn't happen again. Okay, so we're talking about a simplistic root cause analysis. Okay, so it is required and we will look for it on every reportable, except for those reportables which are for unauthorized use of restrictive practice ongoing, not the odd one. If it's being used because you've got an interim plan, and you're waiting for an interim plan, you probably don't need to do a root cause analysis on those, of course, because it's going to be ongoing until you get the behaviour support plan through. But for every other reportable incident, we expect to see a root cause analysis. Work health safety, you know, that's usually captured in incidents, so it's not really. I keep it here because there are some people that like it and there are some auditors that say they want to see it, but, you know, most people capture all of this stuff in their incident register anyway. And so we talked about complaints. Same thing goes for a complaint. You could take the complaint notification that you've got from someone, whether you've written it out for them or they've written it. And if you don't have a system of managing that complaint or those complaints, that aligns to the standards, then you are going to be non-conforming. You are going to be almost, you know, not quite, but almost, well, you're going to get a minor non-conformity. You could, even if you were having a harsh auditor, if you didn't have a system of recording this stuff, whether it's a software or a manual record, you could even, they would be within their rights to give you a major, to be honest. So some auditors are light touch and others over the top, and others quite reasonable. So we've talked about the individual risk and being able to demonstrate how you're managing that at your audit, which is, remember, the review date. And we've talked about the same on your corporate risk register. We've talked about the importance of governance and how we can't give you points for governance, even if you have perfect, you know, even if you have wonderful, even if you were having meetings at every level of your organization on a weekly basis. If we've got no evidence of it, it's still going to be a not happening thing. Yeah. And still, if you're not recording it, really, it should be a non-conformity, because things have to be recorded to be measured and monitored and referred back to. Please ensure that you've got some environmental sanitizing as well, a record of how you clean the cars that are used, how often you do it. If it's a SIL home, records of the environmental sanitizing that's done, how often. Sometimes that's just done on a register, or sometimes in a software. It doesn't really matter. Now, SIL maintenance. If you are working in SIL, we would expect to see some, and we don't, to see some home property maintenance schedules. We need to see those. We need to see the sanitizing evidence as well. And if you've got SDA, then we would want to be seeing a maintenance inspection schedule, some of those schedules which have been acted out, you know, been implemented, etc. So we'll be looking for evidence of those things. Of course, there is one particular question in the feedback area of governance that talks about where do you get your feedback? Show us where you get feedback and how you use that to change and inform your policies. Now that could look like, you know, and that's why you really want to have that incident complaint system dovetailing into your continuous improvement, because that's where you can demonstrate that you take feedback. You take feedback from wherever it comes from, whether it's through a complaint or whether it's through true feedback, and you look at it and see what you can do to change things. And if it requires a change to your policy, then record that. You know, we want all of these things to dovetail into a system. So recording that is really important. You know, it's where we can see that there's been some massive feedback, yet we can't see anything in your continuous quality improvement register. A good auditor will pull up on that and say, well, there's a, you know, if they're being kind, they'd make it an opportunity for improvement. If they were, they're well within their rights to say it's a non-conformity though. So one other thing you'll need to remember if you've got a range of clients that like, I think once you get over 5 clients, it becomes very difficult to remember what everyone's conditions are. So one of the standards actually says that you have a process in place that allows you to know who needs priority in the event of an emergency or disaster. Now, that's also going to be in the context of, well, do you live in a disaster area? Do you live in an area that is prone to flooding? Do you live in an area that is prone to cyclone? Do you live in an area that's prone to bushfire? The onus on you, if you're one of those providers, is higher than if not. But it is still expected that you will have some way of saying, at an instant, I can look at this list and see every one of my clients and know who is my highest priority and who I know I could take a service from a person from them to service these people. Should I be in a position where my workforce is at 50% capacity? I've only got 50% of my staff, sorry. If I only have half the workforce, who am I going to prioritize? We don't want to hear that it's in your head. We want to know that you've got this system in place which has already worked that out, okay? So really important to have something of that nature as well. Coming down to, here's the other thing. If you haven't, some people who have software, you will be able to say, set a reminder in your software that a person's support plan review date is approaching. I'm not talking about the NDIS one. I'm talking about your support plan and it's due for review, whether it's a support plan or a care plan for the nursing services. You need to be reminded, just like you are with all your insurances, just like you are with the reviews of risk, you need to have some system in place which tells you when that support plan is due for review. It can be as simple as a register, or it can be a software. It doesn't matter what it is as long as it is, because you're only going to get half marks. And I say that as though it's a test. It's not, because, you know, those non-conformities stay on your record and becomes accumulative. So we do want to try to do as well as possible at each and every audit. Do you know that this entire process, and this was laughable, was designed so that you know that you have your re-registration every 3 years, right? So it was designed so that it is a 3-year process, but they do a midterm. And if you were to get no non-conformities in a few times in a row, that they would take away the midterm for those clients, for those providers who did that. I don't think that's happening. which is a shame. But yeah, our audit term outside of NDIS in the services that used to run before NDIS, we were 3-year cycles for mental health or disability or aged care, 3-year cycles. So the reward is still there. If you get no non-conformities, you will be given the opportunity to not have that midterm. But I'm not seeing anyone who's been given that yet. I'm sure there's some out there, but I've not seen them. So the other thing you need to make sure of is that if you need to have evidence that you've onboarded clients and that you've onboarded your staff. Evidence, not just, yeah, I've done it. Where's the package? Where's the signed form? Checklist is the best way to do that. Yeah. So you have some sort of onboarding checklist for staff, some sort of onboarding checklist for participants. Someone has been able to sign off and date it. That's a nice piece of evidence. Now, what we do when we do interviews with those people whose files we've looked at is we try to triangulate that evidence and corroborate that that's occurred. You know, we do the best we can with the people that we've got to find out whether they've been given these things, and we can ask them questions that try to elicit, you know, if they know about complaints, if they know what happens in an incident, if they know what they do if they want an advocate. So we try to triangulate that evidence. So the best way to do it is have an onboarding checklist for staff and an onboarding checklist for clients. Now, if you've got staff and any of them have been there for over a year and your audit's approaching, you are going to have been expected to have done a staff performance appraisal on each one at the 12-month mark. Okay, you will get a non-conformity if you haven't. And we're also going to be wanting to see staff supervision at all levels of your staffing. Now, how long is a piece of string is the answer to how often do you have to have that supervision. I would put it to you like this. You wouldn't want it any less than monthly. It doesn't really matter how it looks. It's not prescribed that it needs to be done in a certain way. It could be 5-minute catch-ups every week. It could be half-an-hour catch-ups every 2 weeks. It could be however you need it to look, but it should be in proportion to the complexity of your clients and the clients those people are seeing. So the more complex clients that people are dealing with, the more stressed they are going to be and the more they will need supervision. Okay, and we will need evidence of that supervision as well. I have a grievance register because one auditor sometimes said it needed a grievance register. I don't think I've ever had anyone ask for it again. Coming back up here, so we're looked at the system. You need to, if I were to say, if you went through a tool like this and populated it, you will know that you have everything all your ducks in a row. And that's how you'll know if you're ready for audit. If you know that you've got some of these things in software, great. Just make sure that everything's completed. If you know your software doesn't have some of these things, then please try to implement something like that. And once you're complete with that, you're pretty good to go to audit. Now, going back to this checklist is purely something that you tick off as you go in collecting those documents. Collecting the documents is what you would do in the first instance if you're getting ready for your very first audit. It's not really for everybody else. If you're already in delivering services, you would simply have this as a kind of guide to make sure that you've got all this information. But following a specific system like this, you'll be ready for audit simply with this on its own. So now, has Keely, you've probably been answering questions, have you? I expect. Yep, looks like you have been. Have we got any other questions, guys, that you would like to ask? Police clearance isn't required if you have the worker screening. That's exactly right. But if you have a person who's going to be working in finance, there are still certain positions that I would want a police check for. But yeah, the workers screening check has made that redundant for support workers. But yeah, I'd still want one for finance. I'd still want to know if someone, you know, had been arrested, had been in jail or whatever for fraud. Because you do actually see a lot of that. I know that seems quite strange to say, but in health, there's a lot of people who have done some funny things. Is there any questions outstanding?
There's some in the chat, Gina.
Okay. What are those positions? What does that one mean? I'll come back to that one because I'm not sure what that means. What extra training should be offered for part-time admin workers? Well, I think that anyone who works for the NDIS should do the mandatory module, or at least the worker orientation module. Worker orientation on the Commission site for sure. And then apart from that, if they're starting to interface with clients, then you start looking at some of those mandatory modules, because I think that, you know, helps people develop some skills in working with people, so they don't say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. I'm not sure what the question about one of those positions.
I think they're talking about what you were saying with the police checks, like some more examples.
Oh, yeah, like finance. There's no way I'd hire anyone in finance without having a police check. If there's anywhere that they have the ability if there's anywhere where there's the ability to steal, embezzle, whether they're objects or it's money, I'd want to know. Because our government departments are fraught with fraud. What's no client interface? Okay, well, really, I would just want, when I think about what training do I want, I think about how do I want to enhance my business, and is this person seemingly interested in doing something? So, but also sitting down and doing a training needs analysis, I think, in line with what their position is and what you see for their future and what they're interested in doing, is also important. I understood you mentioned for finance, would you like to see police checks? Oh yeah, absolutely. Do subcontract ABN support workers require both professional? Oh yes, they certainly do, because subcontract ABN support workers need their own professional indemnity and public liability. I do have a client and they wanted to cover all of theirs under their workers' comp. However, I will tell you, we have still never been able to get a decisive answer from the workers' comp whether they would use that as an excuse, that there is nothing in there to say that they would pay people who are ABN ABN people. And my experience with insurance is that they will use anything to not pay an insurance payout. And because it doesn't mention anywhere in the workers' comp legislation that it will pay ABN contractors, by its very nature, it means independent and they work for themselves, so they could very well not pay. What type of training could be offered to head office core? Oh, well, definitely governance, risk and compliance, definitely. And if they're board training, but we have some really good governance, risk and compliance training specific to the NDIS, of course. But yeah, I mean, quality, you can't know about quality unless you fully understand governance, risk and compliance, because it is a product of those things, you know. So quality, risk, governance, risk and compliance, and then maybe some overview of quality management in NDIS. Any other team or positions, please? What does that mean?
Back to the police check, they're asking just for more examples of positions within the business where you would want them to have a police check.
I think rather than look at a position, if they're ever interfacing with money, cash, petty cash, anything at all, client money, even if they're not a support worker, or have the they have an opportunity to be able to steal goods, people do it. It's fraught with it. It's everywhere. Unfortunately, it is a little bit of human nature, the bad side of human nature. But yeah, I'd want to know. It doesn't mean you don't have to employ people. You can still employ them, but to know and for them to know, might be the thing that helps them not put their finger in the stationery cupboard. You know what I mean? Or the petty cash tin. The recording will be sent out to you. I will put a link in there if anyone wants to buy this compliance management system. I will give you the checklist for nothing. Look, I just, in terms of the insurance, I just think when ABN contractors or employees only have comprehensive, it's probably because the car is crap or they're really, really poor. If the car is crap, I don't know why I wouldn't want my clients in that car. And if they're poor, then you can have a conversation with them, because what happens is they're going to be out of work if they have a accident and they don't have comprehensive. And also the other thing is that they could come looking for you, and I don't think they'd have a problem. I don't think they'd have a problem suing the organisation, because I think that any magistrate is going to take sympathy, and any lawyer who, they're going to take sympathy with them, not with the. So I like comprehensive, whether I have to help them or you have to come up with some big partner arrangement where you get a better deal on comprehensive. I just think it's mad having third-party property only. This Excel tool, how much is our Excel tool?
Oh, I have to check. Can't remember off the top of my head.
We'll give you a discount though, whatever it is, for attending. If purchased, can this compliance measures be? Oh yes, you can do that. Absolutely. Yeah. Just so you know, yeah, you absolutely can, and we're always here to sort of help anyway. If purchased, can this compliance be modified? Yep, I already read that. I think that's it. What insurance company or policy would you recommend for staff when they're transporting participants in their own cars? Well, the policy, I just spoke about the. Oh, you meant policy as in insurance policy. Sorry, yeah, I was about to tell you about our transport policy. No, I think that's it. So there's, there's going to be an enormous amount of people just watching by recording. So I hope all of these questions were helpful for everyone who watches it afterwards.
You know what discount do you want to offer for the compliance management system?
Say again.
What discount do you want to offer for the compliance management system? It's currently on sale for $3.99.
Okay, so I think we'll offer like why don't we offer like a 50% discount
on the usual price or the sale price?
Yes. No, on the sale price.
Okay, so it'll be about 200.
Yeah, and it comes with a video you can watch too. Even though you've had this, I'll give you an intensive video for it. But what else can we say? No more questions? All right. Well, I know everyone's got to go because this was scheduled to finish at 11:30. Lovely, everyone. If there's nothing else, thank you very much for coming, and thank you to everybody who's watching this by recording. And follow us on YouTube if you want to. Effective Policy. Okay, lovely. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.